Okay, good to walk. Yud Aleph Tammuz, which is tonight, is the Yartzeit of Hershele Ziditchov, the terrorist Tzvi. And I wanted to share by melaveh malkah. We sing by melaveh malkah now. It's an Indian to tell stories with Ziditchov, especially of a Yartzeit. So it's even more so. So one story that I read, a very meaningful story from the Hershele Ziditchov, was when he was a bacher. He wrote, when he was a teenager, he wrote his plans of what he's going to do every day, his hanhagas, how he's going to conduct himself. He's going to learn this much, he's going to fast these days, he's going to make a tanis dibur, he's not going to speak from these hour to that hour. And his Rebbe, the Chayzer from Lublin, the seer of Lublin, he found this, he was reading it, and he said, Hershele, so sei geht, aber mal davon teen pink verkehrt. He said, this is very good, but sometimes you need to do the exact opposite, which is an important thing to recognize. Of course, you always have to do your best to follow halacha, but when you're doing things that are beyond the letter of the law, and you're accepting upon yourselves to do these types of things, you have to know there's a time and a place for everything. You can't always do everything exactly the same way every day. You know, sometimes you have issues with family and so forth. We compared it to, for example, Rebbe was writing about this, brought from the Sfarim. You know, you think it's good to fast every day, but then you come to Shabbos, you're not allowed to fast. Erev Yom Kippur, not allowed to fast. The day before Yom Kippur. I think it's good to go to mikveh every day, right? But then it comes Tisha B'Av, Yom Kippur, not allowed to go to mikveh. Things like this. Other story I've heard of Hershele Ziditchov, I heard different versions of the story. I'll tell version I heard from my Rebbe from high school, or Moshe Weinberger, on the tape. Hershele Ziditchov also is my Rebbe, the Kalver Rebbe. It was the Anikel from Hershele Ziditchov. He should be well, the Kalver Rebbe Shlita, Batel Chaim Toim Shalom, Moshe Ben Regel's Rebbe for Shlema. So the story goes that Hershele Ziditchov met the Ketzos. Now, a lot of the Chassidish Rebbes, they didn't get along so well with the Ketzos. He was right of some of the Chassidish Rebbes. He was a classical misnagid, we would call such a term. But he was friendly with Hershele Ziditchov. He was, they were cordial to each other. And of course, the Ketzos was a big tzaddik, The story goes, there were two Chassidish Rebbes sitting, and one quoted the Ketzos, and the other, he said, you learn Ketzos? To this other, both Chassidish Rebbes, and one he wouldn't touch the Sefer, and the other one, he learn anything, He once learned, he said, I had a shayla or something in Choshen Mishpat, and I looked through Yartzeit Chassidish Sefer on the parsha, couldn't learn the whole thing, couldn't find the answer. I opened the Ketzos, it's right there. So anyway, the Ketzos asked for Hershele Ziditchov, what is the Chiddush of Chassidus? And sometimes it's hard to see when you learn, like I talk of my holy ancestor, the Chavos Yor. Look at his Sfarim. This was someone in Germany before the Baal Shem Tov's time, just before the Baal Shem Tov. And you see the spirituality which we today would consider Chassidish spirituality. The same thing we talk of my ancestor, Moshe Aryeh Kruller. Like a Tanzman Fenster, because he didn't want to be, he jumped out the window because he didn't want to be drawn to be a chassid of the Berditchever. when the Ziditchov came to see him. But you read about his hanhagas, the way he conducted. Today we would consider these like Hasidic type hanhagas, not Litvische, not Yakische. So, but still, there's the question: what's the chiddush of Hasidus? And the Piasetzner writes about this in Mavei Yesharim. He has a different take on it, although I would say it's essentially the same. It's just expressed in a different way. Like how the Chazal say that whatever Yeshayahu Navi saw is the same what Yecheskel ben Buzi saw. Whatever Yecheskel saw is what Yeshaya saw. That the Ezekiel and Isaiah saw the same visions, even though they describe it differently. So the Ketzais asked to Hershele Ziditchov, the Teres Tzvi, what is the Chiddush of Chasidus? What we had already the Kabbalists for generations. What is it new that the Hasidic movement brings into the Jewish world? So again, like I said, I've heard two or three different versions of this mashal. I'll say it like this: somebody comes to a town and says, on this island, somewhere in the South Pacific, there's a certain species of bird. Describes that there exists such a bird. A few years later, someone goes to the island and writes a whole book about the bird, draws pictures of the bird. This is before photography existed. And he brings back the book about this bird. And then the third person goes to this island and brings the bird back. Another version I heard was that trying to elect a new leader in a community, and first someone said, I know this guy, and then someone else says, I know a lot about him. The first guy just mentioned his name. The second talked about him. The third brought him there. So, what Hershele Ziditchov said, that the Zohar Kodesh from Shimon ben Yochai taught us that God exists. Of course, we knew God exists before, but he taught us there are certain things. They mentioned briefly certain things existing. The Ariya Kodesh wrote the encyclopedia. He didn't write it. He taught it to Chaim Vital. That's the Ariya Kodesh. So the first Shimon is the one who told us the bird exists, and the Ariya Kodesh is the one who wrote the encyclopedia about the bird. He drew his pictures and wrote articles describing its habits and its form and so forth. And the third one, the Baal Shem Tov Kodesh, is the one who brought the bird to us, or brought the person to us. He brought a Kodesh Baruch Hu to us, Kiviyachal. And when the Ketzais heard this, he said, let's get out of here, else I'm going to become a chassid. Alright, Schusi again, Elaine of Al-Kali Solomon, and Schusi telling these stories, we should have a munah, we should be ehrlich, we should be normal, we should do things the right way, so aufwachsen zu sein, ehrliche Chassidische Yidden, and be able, in the Schusi of the Tzaddik, to have all the Heshbois Tovus and all the good things in the world. And in the Schusi of telling these stories, we should be good bench for the good week and a good year and everything, and a good life. Alright, kol tuv, a good tavach.